right, so I'm tracing my pattern onto the material. When I'm tracing, I want to be careful not to draw my lines on the perforated holes. We want to try to avoid these as much as possible because when you cut them, they create a bunch of sharp edges. So easy to just avoid it. And I've also rounded all my corners so that as I'm cutting it out, I can just get rid of those sharp corners from the beginning. It's warmed up a little enough for it to be easy to cut, and it's kind of pliable. I put it on a towel. I just kind of dry off both sides. When I cut the pattern out, I'm not pulling on the pattern, I'm pulling on the extra pieces because that can change the shape. And then as I cut, I'm again just sort of avoiding those holes. And I'm turning the pattern but keeping it stable on the table. And then you can see again, I'm not lifting and pulling, I'm just leaving it flat. And then as I'm cutting, I'm also making sure that I have all those edges rounded. I'm trying to make long, smooth cuts so that I don't leave any edges sharp. So it's lost some of its pliability just from the time out of the water, so I'm going to put it back in and make sure that my client is ready for it to be molded. Okay, so I've again made sure that my model is in anatomical neutral, except for her wrist is slightly extended to 15 degrees, but I'm making sure that she's not deviating in any direction or trying to flex. Then I'm just really gently trying to form the material. I'm not pushing with my hands, I'm not leaving fingerprints, I'm just sort of lightly positioning. Now in the palm, you need to use a little bit more force to get those palmar arches so it fits. And then it's still a little thick here, so I'm going to kind of roll it so it's more comfortable and getting the material to stick together. And then flex your fingers. So I can tell that that's in the way of her palmar crease, so I'm gonna just roll this down as well. Now you can also trim it, but I think the roll gives a little bit more support and comfort. Now this looks like it needs to be trimmed just a tad, so I'm just gonna mark with my fingernail that area, and then I'm going to do just a gentle flare at the bottom so it doesn't dig into her arm. And then again, I'm making sure that she's in the right position. Now oppose your thumb to your, yeah. This is a good way to check to make sure that I've cleared away enough of the material from her palm. Is that rubbing anywhere? Mm-hmm. Okay, now relax. Now I'm making sure that it's hardened enough that it keeps its shape when I lift it up, but I can still cut through so I can trim these small areas. Sorry. So I lift up, it's still not keeping its shape, so I'm just trying to be patient and let it harden a little. And while it's hardening, I'm making sure that her ulnar styloid is clear, that she's not having any pressure points on any of her bony prominences. I'm making sure that that roll has stuck. On the dorsal side of the hand, I'm making sure that this isn't rubbing, which it looks a little close, so I'll probably trim this area too. So now it's hardened a little bit, it's keeping its shape. So now I'm gonna take it off and just do those quick trims while the material is still a little soft. Just making sure. Now this would be the time to do any other adjustments before you put the Velcro on. I'm just going to trim this side a little bit since it seems like it's coming over. This spot is an area where I didn't cut cleanly, so I'm just gonna go roll this with the heat gun. As well as areas like this I need to trim off because those will rub. So I let the heat gun warm up. And then, so that I don't melt the material and lose my pattern completely, I just gently wave the material over the heat gun until it's warmed up just a tad, and then I use the pad of my finger to just gently roll. If you leave it over the heat gun too long, it will lose its shape, so be careful. Or it'll burn your finger. Okay, so now that edge is rounded, I'm not worried about it rubbing her. Now I put the Velcro on. I do one long piece at the wrist since that's the most important area of control. I angle the two bottom pieces to account for the sloping of the arm. I do a small piece on this side, and then I do one small piece here. Trim that a little bit. Okay. So I've cut this one too long, so I just do a little mark to know where I need to trim it. And then you never cut on the patient. So I'm taking the strapping off. I'm rounding the corners. And I left this one a little long, so you could trim again if you wanted to. Okay, lift up and model. So the strap is tight enough that her wrist is supported. It's wide enough, the trough is wide enough that her arm is supported down here. And the hand piece is clear of her MCPs both on the volar and dorsal side.